Welcome back. So we'll start off as always with drawing a card for, I guess, our process. Maybe this is just a starting point to think about. So I'll draw this randomly, as you can see. And we've got Artemis as our card. So Artemis has got two important aspects. One of them is that she's the card of the moon. And the moon, of course, is about following our instincts and our intuition. And that of course stands us in very good stead for this sort of process that we're embarking on. Yes, on the one hand, this is a training, learning process, but on the other hand, and with all breath work, it's also a process of learning to trust our inner guidance and trust what our gut feeling is saying in many senses. And this is something that comes up often in breathwork sessions. It's that maybe a little bit of a struggle sometimes of, where am I getting in the way too much of this journey, and where do I need to step back? But very often our clients and the people that we're working on actually do need a little bit of guidance. Of course, hopefully our guidance is correct, our inner guidance is correct for them, but it's a very important thing to learn that discernment, and that's definitely something that you learn by working with people and getting feedback from them. And then going back to Artemis, the other aspect of Artemis that relates to that instinctual side is that she's the goddess of the forests. So she's the wild woman, the wild feminine. She kind of roams the forest hunting for what it is that she wants to manifest and create and draw into her life. So she starts off casting a broad net. She starts off kind of very broad in her intention. But then eventually, once she starts to track something, once she starts to get the feeling of something or reads the signs, then she can sort of really hone in on the target. And that is what, hopefully, how this process will unfold for us. We start off with, a very broad context. That could be in our personal manifestation for our personal year, but it can also be in our work with the breath work, starting off broad and then starting to hone in on exactly what it is that we want. So, going back to our 20 breaths process a few minutes ago, if at first you feel that you don't exactly know what it is that you want to create or what it is that you want to focus on this year, through the course of the year that will become clear, and your intuition and the signs, the spiritual guidance will help you with that. And I think an important point to remember is very often people don't maybe consciously necessarily know exactly what it is that they want or how they want to progress or how they feel that their dreams will be manifested. So maybe there's that feeling of, oh, I'm not getting that gut feeling, I'm not getting that knowing. But very often it is the signs in the world out there that guide us. It's the opportunities that come up that show us the way. So that inner world dialogue is equal to the outer world dialogue. The signs coming in the outside world are just an extension of our inner world. There is, however, kind of the trap, and this happens a lot, with ceremonies or when you're about to do very deep processes, that, maybe resistances come up or things get in the way, maybe like car accidents or other things delay, the sort of you getting to where you need to be. And then people sort of say, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be, that's a sign. And that sort of case isn't always a sign. It's a sign maybe of your own resistance, and it's maybe showing you the ways in which you're getting in your own way. So the sign's not literally like, oh, this thing wasn't meant to be. It can often just be about showing you where the resistance lies, and where we actually need to work on really being clear and strong about our bigger intention. We can have a bigger intention, but we don't know how to manifest it. And it's staying faithful to the principles of our bigger intention that are very important, despite any of the resistance or vicissitudes that might get in the way along the way. So, that reading of the signs is a very important process. in our own, inner journey, but also, of course, in our work with others and in our interaction with others. So this session today, of course, is session 1 in our 1-year process for 2024. Most of you have done last year's process, and many of you are also ready to start doing your case studies, which is wonderful. And of course, if you are ready to do your case studies, do be in contact with me directly. And we'll also have some time at the end of the session if you want to ask questions about the case studies. But you can be in contact with me directly if you're ready to start those. Just as a brief recap, the requirements for the Breathwork certification are that you do 150 hours of breathwork with sort of a breathwork practitioner or with someone helping you and holding you in the space. These Zoom sessions do count 3 hours per session towards that 150 hours. The second condition is that you cover the material, cover the theory for the breathwork so that you know what to do and how to do it. The third, probably the most important aspect, is doing the case studies. So the 150 hours plus understanding the principles are very important, and they kind of tie in together. The case studies are where you start doing your own work with this journey, and the case studies involve you doing 3 case studies of 10 sessions each. So 3 people, 10 sessions each. Often, not always, but often, some people pull out in the middle of their 10 session process. So then, unfortunately, you have to kind of, start again. You have to do the full 10 sessions, because the importance of this journey is that you actually take someone through a process. And that's one of the principles of rebirthing. Usually in rebirthing, people need to commit to a 10 session process. And that's very powerful because, of course, it gets us through the bumps, and it gets us through the highs and the lows of any spiritual process. So, doing this 1-year process, it's also a 10 session process, kind of reflects that as well. It reflects the individual 10 session process. Then the last requirement, of course, for getting your breathwork practitioner certificate from me is, of course, just to satisfy me that you can take someone through a 10 session process and that you can hold space. And in that regard, first of all, people often say, I don't feel ready to take someone through a 10 session process. And it's important to bear in mind that, okay, you might not have a therapist's degree or have done other therapy work, but the breathwork in itself is the therapy. The breathwork in itself is the cocoon that holds the space for the other person. You've obviously just got to be clear and have that experience, those 150 hours of breathwork experience, to help the client through. The breathwork is kind of the cocoon that makes it safe. Of course, your loving presence and your awareness working with these people also makes it safe for them. But then, of course, for you to have some of the theoretical knowledge and understanding, as well as having gone through the process yourself, is really important, because it's only kind of once you have that knowledge and understanding that you can take someone else through it. So again, that's why it's kind of that's why this process is a long process. That's why this process is very much about your own spiritual and psychological journey as well. But my suggestion always is, if you're very keen to work as a breathwork practitioner, and I think most of you who are keen have been on the spiritual path for a long time, I think it's important to have some sort of other sort of therapeutic knowledge and understanding behind you as well. I mean, that could be something like Reiki, it could be massage therapy, it could be a psychology degree, it could be having worked with other modalities, it could be astrology, etc. There are other tools that you can add into your breathwork toolbox. The breathwork itself is the way to really get the person into a deep emotional, psychological, spiritual journey and process. And that's one half of the 2-hour breathwork individual session. The first half of that session, that 2-hour session, which is the standard format for a breathwork session, is to do some form of diagnosis or some other form of process work. And if you don't have experience with process work in that way, it could be really valuable for you to look into counseling or to look into coaching. There are a lot of very good coaching courses around, which I find to be very complementary to the breathwork as well. Again, that's a suggestion. And the whole idea with the breathwork process is that you find your own way. And again, that takes us back to the Artemis card, is that you find your own way with the breathwork. The breathwork itself, the actual breathwork session is kind of standard, but how you run that session, especially for the first half of the session, how you help your client gain sort of deeper understanding and insight into themselves is something that you will do more from your own experience, from what you've been through yourself, or from a sense and a feeling that you have, and then develop and cultivate of what would be valuable for either for yourself or for other people to go through in that growth process. So we do have a few new people in the group for this year, so welcome to you. I will just do a very brief little talk about breathwork. I'm not going to do the basic nuts and bolts about what breathwork is about. I'm going to give my sort of understanding of what it's about, which I think is sort of on a deeper level, and maybe information that's not out there, that there's actually what is available in books and so forth is either very superficial, or otherwise it's more geared towards yoga, or otherwise it's kind of the less spiritual approach to breathwork, the more psychological approach perhaps, or the more sort of Wim Hof style of breathwork. And I'm not criticizing any of those other ways. They're all important, and they're all very powerful, different uses and approaches to breathwork. But my approach to breathwork is sort of more the spiritual process. One could even say shamanic approach to breathwork, obviously given my experience in other areas. But breathwork itself can be a meditation tool, and that's usually how it's used in yoga. It can be sort of a more countered technical approach, and I do have a 44 breaths breathwork technique on YouTube. The 44 breaths is a great way to start any either journey with another client at the beginning of a session that you might run. It's also a great way to start or introduce any sort of meditation that you're doing for yourself in your own space. So those sort of more countered, let's say more intellectual or logical approaches to breathwork are wonderful because they're using the breath, be it in a more, let's say, rational way to go beyond the mind. And that's the first thing we need to remember about what breathwork is, or where breathwork fits in terms of a bigger spiritual context. Breathwork is directly related to the element of air, and the element of air, symbolically speaking and quite literally, is related to the faculty of the mind, the intellect, all that's airy in the head. So a lot of people say that they struggle with meditation. It's difficult to concentrate. So some of these countered breathwork techniques are very good to calm the mind, to put the brain waves into a structured kind of form or pattern, so that the mind isn't all over the place, so that the mind can become focused and that we can enter a meditative space. So those meditative, yogic, Buddhist meditation, breathwork techniques are perfect for that. What we're doing here, and this encompasses rebirthing breathwork, it encompasses holotropic breathwork and other process-based breathworks. My focus for this is around using the breath to enter an altered state of consciousness. And usually it does. Usually breathwork, even, sort of in a very meditative space, takes us into some sort of altered state of consciousness, a deeper meditative space. But the space that we want to get into is even beyond that, let's say, meditation space. Meditation is often about the calm mind and sort of like the kind of crisp, focused, conscious awareness of what we're doing, being relaxed, being in the body. The trance state is the altered state of consciousness. That's going beyond the rational mind, that's going beyond even the ego, beyond even our sort of direct worldly experience, and creating an openness that we can have a direct experience of the soul, the beyond, the divine. When we enter that space of connecting to the soul, we get on track with our purpose, we get on track with our vision. We are able to look back in our lives and to see where we're getting stuck or where the emotional energy or traumas are sitting. And we can also look forward as to understanding better what the vision ahead is. And when we have a vision ahead, then of course we know where to go and we know where to focus our energy. So this process-orientated breath work it's always about a deeper connection to our truest self. And when we get that deeper connection to our truest self, it also, by extension, opens us to a deeper / higher connection to our spiritual being and our spiritual self. So it really opens us to more of who we really are, that information that's kind of held in the spiritual realm. So, one of the models that I've spoken about before, and I'll recap this because I think it's fundamental to this work with breath work, is that at our core, we are, our psycho-spiritual structure is like an onion with different layers. But at the core of this onion is the light, the love, the truth. That is who we really are. That is our spiritual essence. That is our soul essence. And then, if we take it that when we incarnate, we are very aware and very connected to that spiritual source and essence, then beyond that, we get layers that are built up over time to help strengthen the ego, or layers that are damaging, that have also formed the ego, caused the ego to make different decisions in terms of its survival. So those aren't necessarily decisions made in truth, but they maybe they're infantile decisions that we make, but that are very appropriate at the time. For example, I have been hurt emotionally, because of how my parents have treated me, and therefore I will shut down my emotions so that I don't get hurt again. That's one of the simplistic sorts of decisions one could make. And that, of course, goes against the core of who we are, which is, based in light, love, truth, faith, etc. So, we are this complex, very simple at core, our truth at our core, the truth of who we are spiritually, psychologically, with all these onion layers of our built up, acquired experience. And that kind of makes up the sum total of our ego. And then, if we say that this onion, or let's call it this sphere of our being and our consciousness, has a place where it ends, has an edge, what's beyond that edge is the so-called outside world. So very often we are focused around that edge on the outside of this sphere or of this circle, whereby we are experiencing consciousness that is externally motivated, or it's looking to the outside world for either attention or for distraction or for information as to survival. And that, of course, is very much what the body's function is in this physical material world. You know, the body and our sort of our vigilance and our awareness of the world outside is very much about survival. And, you know, as a physical being, our threats, the threats to our survival, do come from the outside world. So that's why we develop a certain awareness and vigilance as to the outside world. But that's not who we are entirely. You know, we are our bodies, we are our connection with the outside world as well. But of course, we are the inner world. It's the inner motivations, the passions that push us or pull us, as well as a sense of a spiritual purpose or a vision or a mission that we are on, that pulls us from within. So when we enter breath work, we can maybe take our attention from the edges of that sphere that's connected to the outside world, and then we can start to let the energy of our awareness go ever inwards, go deeper and deeper and deeper into our center. And that model has got two kind of applications, interesting or important applications. One of them is that, you know, when we're doing deep process work, there might be a certain resistance to allowing ourselves to go deeper, because we have this fear of, oh, you know, whatever's deeper is going to be more scary. Or, you know, if I keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, I'm going to go more and more and more into the obscurity, into the darkness. But with this model, of course, that's not true. We're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper into our truest core of light and love. So that kind of gives us permission to surrender more and more with the knowledge and the knowledge and the trust that we're going to be going into our deepest being, the deepest place of healing, which is our deepest connection to the divine. And when we enter that place of the divine, we are renewed, we are refreshed, we are able to forgive the past, we are able to be reborn, because we're touching that center of our being, and that can then expand outwards again through those layers, to heal those layers, to discharge any of the charges that we might have around different traumas or different experiences in our life. We can dispel those spells that we may have put on ourselves through our beliefs, or that we may have taken on from our society and our upbringing. We can get rid of those spells that have held us back, so that we can fully express our inner core more and more without those different layers. You know, those different layers of the onion are opaque, they're non-transparent, which means that they kind of dim the light that's at our core, symbolically speaking. So as we kind of work through those layers, we make them transparent, we dissolve them, so that the light at our core can shine brighter, which means that we become more inwardly focused in some senses, not contemplating our navels, but, you know, being centered in our true selves. And when we're centered in our true selves, we radiate that something that people pick up on. It's love, it's light, it's authenticity. We radiate that, and that becomes like a magnet in our world to attract the positive things, or to attract the circumstances that help us grow, and the circumstances that help us live out our truth, live out our vision, our mission. You know, we are on this planet to do certain things, to have certain experiences. Once we are radiant with that light of our core, we are supported in that light somehow. The right people, the right circumstances come towards us to open us. But it's not even a question of, we're radiating this light and then things are attracted towards us. It is that on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's just, that is just who we are. So what happens in the world out there is just an extension of who we are, and that seems to be the attraction of certain circumstances and experiences. But it's actually just about knowing our own true being better. And it's about trusting our own true being, trusting the world, so that we can, on a deep level, say, this is who I am, this is me in the world, and how can I better express me, and what experiences can I, number one, sort of bring in, but also what can I curate and cultivate in my life in order to live more of, express more of my truest being in the world. So that, of course, is what we need to do as therapists. We need to develop that ability to have gone through the process of understanding our truest core. And then, of course, through transmission, throughout the time that we spend with our clients, we can help make it safe for them as well to experience their own true core. And I really do believe that's a very, very important principle. It's a principle in Eastern mysticism and religion and spiritual growth and elsewhere, is that the energy that we hold and radiate is picked up on an unconscious level by the people that we interact with. And when we are teaching them, or when we are doing something like breath work with them, there is a transmission of energy. If we feel safe in our journey with breath work, we will make it safe for others in their journey with breath work, and we will be able to convey to them that they can go in deep, they can go into process, and that we can bring them back out, and that they can trust us, and that they can trust the process. So again, that's why we need to go through the journey ourselves first, and then we can start to hold space for others. And it's very literally sort of you being a shepherd, and you going and exploring, let's say, the mountainside, and then when it's safe, or when you've been to a new mountainside, you can actually take your sheep there. And I don't mean that metaphor as a patronizing metaphor for the client, of course. It's just as kind of a leader, you need to do the exploration first, and then you can let other people follow you, and you can take them into that space. So that model, of course, is a model that we'll be working with throughout this process. That model holds many principles. The first principle is it's about finding our core. That is why we go into the process, into the journey, to find that core, to live that core, to get a visceral experience of that core. It's one thing to think about it, but it's another thing to know it on a visceral level. When we know it on a visceral level, it permeates and transforms our whole being. And then beyond that, once we know that viscerally, then we can start to manifest better in our lives. And that, of course, is a very important part of the breathwork journey on a philosophical but also very practical level. Is when you do breath work, you're not just doing breath work to feel calmer, you're not just doing breath work to heal your body, you're doing breath work to heal your entire life. You're doing breath work to shift the frequency in your inner world, so that your outer world will reflect that new frequency that you're bringing in. So the principle of manifestation is central to the breathwork analysis process, to the breathwork journey in general. The one that you do with your clients, the one that you do for yourself. Manifestation, or what manifests and comes into your life, is a very central point and key to what people are going through. So if you're taking someone on a 10-session journey, for example, and you address loving relationships in a session, and in the week following, your client either attracts a relationship into their lives, or a relationship goes into a problem area, that is a direct reflection of something that has been brought up by the breath work. and it's something in the emotional life that needs to be addressed there. And that happens on all different levels in one's life. So getting feedback from the client about what they've been going through, what's been happening in their lives, seemingly unrelated to what's happening inwardly, but what's happening in the client's life is absolutely central to the inner journey. And so we need to be very attentive and get the feedback from the clients as to what's happening, what they're going through, what they're doing, so that that becomes a tool for understanding and analysis in the client's life. We'll go into the magician's or sage's journey. So the reason why I evoked either a magician's journey or a sage's journey earlier in the meditation is because it depends on where you are in your life. Maybe you're feeling in your life at this time that your physical reality, your abundance levels, your relationships, etc., aren't what you would like them to be. And therefore it becomes a magician's journey for you, where you've got to act as the magician to change physical manifestation. Otherwise, and it's, one isn't mutually exclusive of the other. So I'm not saying it's either or, but you might find that your focus goes in one direction or another. The other side is, as the sage's journey, it might be a situation where you say, okay, I've got things pretty much in order in my physical world. Things are flowing pretty well, and I really want to focus on going deeper into my spiritual growth. And then it'll be the sage's journey. But both of those journeys relate to, I would say, and these are some things that I've been thinking about in the last few months on a very deep level, is that the magician's or sage's journey is the next step on from the hero's journey. Of course, I'm sure all of you have heard about the hero's journey. I'm going to take you through the hero's journey very briefly of the tarot to show you what the hero's journey is first, and then I will take you on the magician's or sage's journey, which is kind of consciously going in the opposite direction to the hero's journey, because you already have the knowledge and wisdom of the hero's journey. I'll make that clear in a moment. So if that all seems very mysterious and vague, it will be very clear, hopefully, by the end of the session. So I do need to say, first of all, I know some of the people who joined us in Bali were in this group today. So first of all, welcome. And I first presented the magician or sage's journey in Bali in early February, and that was the first time I've kind of worked with this principle or concept. And that was for a 10-day breathwork retreat, and we followed this journey of the magician's journey. And it was really incredible to see how that played out in people's processes. And it started off with people very much going into the dark stuff, the difficult stuff, and then day by day just moving more and more into the light until that was kind of fully grounded and integrated by the end of that 10-day process. So we'll do a similar thing here. So in a nutshell, whereas the hero's journey follows the sun, so it goes from, the hero's journey starts at sunrise, goes to midday, sunset, and the night at the bottom representing the underworld, representing the deepest psychological transformations we need to go through in order to become a hero. But before we can even go on that hero's journey into the underworld within this scheme, you've got to grow, you've got to learn the rules of life, you've got to sort of have the basic building blocks in place, and then life kind of mysteriously and randomly takes you into this underworld journey, into the night, where you have to enter the unknown, where you have to enter the fear, where you have to undergo initiation in order to come out the other end and be ready for the birth of the new day. I will take you through the tarot journey of that in a moment. In a nutshell, that hero's journey kind of happens to you. You know, you're kind of called out of the normal world, often quite abruptly and brutally, and you are forced to kind of face your inner hero, or you're forced to undertake that hero's journey so that you can become more, so that you can become more of an expression of your true spiritual purpose in the world. So if we take that journey as, you know, sort of following the sun, midday, sunset, nighttime, and then back to dawn here, with the magician's or sage's journey, you've already been through that circle. You've already done that. And you've gained experience here. You're wise. And then you go against the stream of life. You go against the stream of creation in many senses. And then you enter the underworld first. You go back into the underworld with more awareness. It's still fresh in your memory. And then you go back into the underworld, work through that stuff so that you can sort of get to the sunrise here, and then better live the day, better live or reap the benefits of your deep work in the time to come. So roughly speaking, what that will mean in terms of this magician or sage's journey for this process, for this year, is that we'll sort of go into the darker, deeper stuff at the beginning of this journey, and then we will reap the benefits in the second half of the year, and that is kind of where the manifestation, the light of day comes into our lives. And that might mean working through the deeper stuff now, getting that out of the way, because we've already got lots of experience, most of us, so that we can then go into the day and go into the next level. So I will take you through the tarot, and you don't need to have a knowledge of the tarot to understand this, or to look at this, or to work with this. But, you know, I work with the tarot because it's obviously such a wonderful map of life and of the world. So we'll, you know, here I've got the 21 tarot cards laid out. There is a 22nd one, which is the Fool, which is the card outside. You know, the Fool is the soul outside this journey. So I'm going to briefly take you through this aspect, the hero's journey, working with the cards, and then we'll look at the magician's journey after. But you don't need to get hung up on the tarot or knowing the meanings of the cards or whatever. This is as a map. If you do know the tarot, it's something nice to follow. Or it'll obviously be a map that you can understand more easily, but we'll take a quick look at this now. So we start off with the magician here, and then we go through this journey of life and growth here. So these are 21 cards that represent the journey in the world, the journey from the magician who is born into the world unconscious, and through the journey then becomes conscious. I just see that some of these cards are the wrong way around. So this is that journey of incarnating with a Fool. Now, the Fool starts us on this path. The Fool is the soul before incarnation. So the soul is free, the soul is fully formed, fully dimensional, but then comes in, is born as the magician. So I'm going to talk about these cards not as sort of tarot cards to be read in a reading. I'm going to talk about these as different stages in the life journey. And those different stages do relate to the meanings of the cards, but you know, the purpose or the function of this session isn't to go with the meaning of the actual tarot. So the magician represents birth. You know, the symbolism of the magician card is he's got the 4 elements on his altar. Those are the 4 elements of the world: earth, water, air, fire. But the magician is the 5th element. The 5th element, which is the soul aspect, which is what determines what we do with those 4 elements in manifestation. So the magician, in this case, being newly born on this life journey, doesn't fully know him or herself yet. So they have to go through this journey in order to know themselves. And that culminates in the world card, where you can see she is standing inside the creation, inside the four elements. Here the magician is outside the four elements. So this is a process of incorporation. It's a process of finding self in this world. So the first phase, of course, is education, and that is these first four cards here. I am following the standard order of the major arcana, just because that's a simple first step for those of you who don't know the tarot. So here we've got the High Priestess, which represents our mystical connection. That's our intuition. So, when we're newly born, we're still very much, especially for the first months, very much connected to the divine. That's the High Priestess, the instinct, the connection to spirit. But the conditioning process starts in the first 7 years, which is the phase of the mother with the Empress. So it's with the Empress phase, usually the first 7 years of life, if we take this as a life journey, that all the conditioning around the mother happens, around the feminine happens. And, usually when people don't have a nurturing, loving mother, or there's some sort of, problems in the relationship with the mother, that affects the child for the rest, of their life. So that is also where we learn about culture. That is where we learn about our body and health. That is where we learn to take care of ourselves, to accept love. But this is a very pre-verbal stage. It's a stage before we are thinking logically. It's a phase where we're basically in a state of hypnosis the whole time. Everything that we see in the world around us is just going straight into the subconscious mind, and we're taking on those beliefs. And it's usually in the beliefs of this phase that most of our traumas or our limitations sit, because we just take in these beliefs unquestioningly. Usually it's what we see in our home environment. If our parents are struggling with money, for example, we have the belief money is short, and the world is a place of scarcity, and that's just how it is. And then we hold on to that belief, and then we keep manifesting from that place. So this is where most of our conditioning happens until the age of 7. Then with the Emperor, the masculine energy, the two cards here, the High Priestess and the Empress are the feminine aspect. We've got the two masculine aspects here. The Emperor and the Empress are the more worldly expressions of these, and then the Hierophant and the High Priestess are the more spiritual manifestations of the masculine and feminine. So the Emperor usually relates to about the phase of 7 to 14 years old, and that is where we start to learn what society wants us to learn, what society values. That is where we go to school. That is where we start to develop our intellectual faculties, and where we become good worker bees for what the system, whatever that is, wants. So maybe in a tribal setting, that would be becoming good hunters. In a modern situation, that would be learning mathematics and good communication, so that we can be plugged into the IT world or whatever. So that is where our intellectual, rational look at the world is developed. Here it's very much more the childlike, poetic, magical way of things. Here we start to force ourselves to look at things logically. And then the Hierophant or High Priest or Pope is where we start to learn the orthodoxy of the religion of our culture. And that is where we do, let's say, Bible studies, or that is where we follow religion in a conventional way. And that's got less of a personal approach to our spirituality and religion. It's something learned. It's something that society also gives us. But sometimes in a good situation that can be positive, in that we learn certain rules and we learn certain ethics, and then we learn to sort of follow those in the world, and they kind of inform how we do things. That can also relate to the age or the phase of adolescence, where we question and where we rebel. In an ideal situation, that would mean we have kind of a mentor who can help us and show us the way, but that's also quite rare in the modern world to have kind of good mentors, in adolescence. So this is the phase, this is our basic building blocks until about the age of, let's say, 18. It's obviously not an exact science or an exact number. But then we get to the Lover's card, which relates to our first experience of love, of a partner. And it's through our relationships, of course, that we learn so much about ourselves as well. We have that mirror of the partner. We have the mirror of the relationship to really show us what sort of things we learned, what sort of beliefs we held onto from there. I mean, this can take a long time to unravel, but in the early 20s, falling in love becomes very important, and that is something we focus on, and that is something that we learn through. And then also here with the Chariot, we learn about career, and we learn about how we conduct ourselves in the world. The symbolism of the Chariot is about keeping the chariot on the path. So the horses might be pulling in different directions, but it's through our strength and our will and our concentration that we hold that chariot on the path. But that is where we kind of, in the early 20s, also start to learn about our career. Not necessarily the career that is our heart's desire, but the career that we need to survive in the world. And then, this represents, the strength card represents this phase of the 20s where we have to learn our strength through adversity. So if you look at that card, she's putting her hands in the mouth of the lion, and that represents us facing our fears, learning the courage to tame the wild animal so that wild animal can become our ally. And when we make that wild animal our ally, we become so much stronger. They work with us. So this is really that phase where we have to learn strength in sort of our 20s in order to survive in the world. Then with the Hermit, something starts to happen. We've maybe learned some of the things of the world, but an inner calling starts to come, and that is where we start contemplating our own inner light. And that inner light is our deeper spiritual connection. It's not this orthodox religious connection. It's our deeper inner light. It's that part of us that says, I am not necessarily all of that conditioning of the phases before. There's something else. I need time alone. I need to be by myself in order to understand who I am. Then we get the Wheel of Fortune. When this, on the one hand, relates more or less to the Saturn return, which is at about the age of 30, where our lives are very often turned upside down, where very important decisions are made or circumstances push us into certain directions. And that is where we get more on track with our destiny. When we can observe this inner light better, and it goes back to that light at our core that I spoke about earlier, when that light at our core is really strengthened, this process here can really propel us forward in our spiritual and other growth. But in general, this is just about destiny opening doors to new ways so that we can find new balance. And it's kind of after our 30s that we start to live a life that is more ours, where we are more comfortable with ourselves, where we're expressing ourselves better in the world. And this phase here with justice is where we're in the world, where we're balanced. You can see it's right in the middle of this whole process. So it's kind of that place of equilibrium, between the wheel that rises and then falls. The rising of the wheel is the first half of life where we're growing and then it reaches that place of equilibrium, and then the fall or the turning upside down starts. And on the one hand, that might be old age or middle age starting. On the other hand, it's going from an outward, an outward focus to starting our inward focus, which starts here with the Hermit. So the Justice card is that place of equilibrium before, and you can see the next card is the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is hanging upside down, looking at the world from a different perspective, before we start to look at the world from a different perspective. And this is where the hero's journey kicks in. Up until now, and if you look at sort of fairy tales and mythology, all of this is where the hero has just been doing their thing in the world, and they might have had a calling, they might have had some sort of understanding, they might have developed certain strengths without knowing why they've developed them. But the Hanged Man is the point at which something happens in the hero's life that pulls him and her out of the normal world and makes them realize they have to go into the underworld to get their treasure, their holy grail. And in many stories, the hero loses something, or the hero needs something. They need healing, or they need a treasure. Could be a spiritual treasure, could be a worldly treasure. They need a treasure in order to move forward. They can stay here, but then their lives are not going to be satisfied. They're going to get stuck. They're going to be limited. So this Hanged Man card is the point of transition, where you stand at the mouth of the cave or at the edge of the abyss, and you realize you have to go in, but you kind of hope that you don't have to go in. You hope that the world can stay normal, but at some point you're going to have to jump. And that's where the Death card comes in. So that's that step into the underworld, the afterworld, the world of Hades in Greek mythology, where you face death. And it's not necessarily death of you or the death of someone else, but it's the death of that old world. You have to make the step into letting go, surrendering, being okay with letting go of all that you've learned, but also all that you've acquired, all of your comfort zones, so that you can embark on what's beyond in the underworld down here. So, you can see schematically, we've got 3 levels. We've got the level of kind of early adulthood and the normal world. We've got the level of where we're questioning, where things are very much in the balance. Here we've got a duality with strength. We've got a duality with justice, with black and white. We've also got a duality here with a Temperance card. The Temperance card represents having stepped into that world of death and the transformation that starts, to take place. And this might be the honeymoon phase of being in the underworld, where we've let go of all of the stuff and we feel so free. And this might relate to your life, and I think this happens a lot when we embark on the spiritual life. We let go of some of these old conditionings and patterns and ways of doing things, and we feel very free here. It all seems, very much rainbows and unicorns, and it's a wonderful new world opening up. But then we realize that a lot of the old demons are the same, or a lot of the demons have actually gotten bigger. So now we have to face the demons that are in these other places, in these other aspects of our lives. We haven't been able to do the spiritual bypass, so that we can just make everything all sort of pretty. We have to face this guardian of the mysteries, of the treasure, of the Holy Grail, which is the devil. So the devil represents kind of really facing all of our fears, facing all the lies, the untruths, sickness in ourselves, if it's a healing process we're on, so that it can be broken. And that is the Tower card. The Tower is about breaking down those old lies, so that we can eventually get to these next cards here, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the devil is all the sort of calcified, built up belief systems that start here in our conditioning process that if they really are lies within us, the body and the unconscious mind is trying to get rid of, to clean out, but we're on some level stubbornly holding on to them. So the devil kind of represents all of the old patterns and beliefs that want to kill us, that want to sabotage us. And they would kill us if we weren't on a path of initiation, if we weren't on a path of growth. But given that we're on a path of growth, we find the means to transcend this, to die symbolically so that we can be reborn. So this process here of the devil and of the tower are facing the lies, and then that tower of lies being broken down by the eye of God. And that tower represents the final death, the final breaking of those structures. And it's quite a strong, violent process, but it's always divinely inspired. So the tower is about finally breaking down the untruths so that we can get to the star, which is about truth, which is about hope, which is about redemption after facing these difficulties, so that we can be naked, we can stand in our naked truth. You can see that in the star card there. We can stand in our naked truth, and then we can face this last phase of our lives where we exit the underworld and where we can become guided spiritually by the moon, where we can become enlightened by the sun, where the miracles and the shifts can take place in our worlds so that we can be fully realized with the world card. And you know, these last 4 cards here represent the benefits that we reap after we've been through the underworld. So with, you know, the magician's journey, the magician's sage's journey, we're going to be going back this way, and we're going to be facing these things first so that we can really spend more time reaping the benefits up here and reprogramming this early phase of conditioning so that we can follow our greater truth in the world. So, I mean, in many ways, you know, this hero's journey is, you know, there is kind of a mirror reflection here, but we're just going to, you know, through the sage's journey, which I'm going to explain in a moment, we're going to give more attention to this phase here. But what's very interesting about this bottom part is obviously in the darkest moment, we have the star, which is the furthest light, the moon, which is the next brightest, and then the sun, which is the brightest, which then comes into manifestation in our physical world. You know, the world card is the last card here. So we need to enter the darkness in order to be able to return to the light or be reborn into the light. We need to enter the night so that the next day may dawn in a way that we are reborn, that we are transfigured, that we are transformed. You know, a really powerful journey. It could seem really scary, especially with the devil in the tower and the death cards. But through our, you know, journey this year of the sage's journey, we will, you know, we will work with a few of these cards each session in order to understand what it is that we're working through, not only for ourselves, but also for our clients, and in terms of the journey that we take our clients through. So that hero's journey is about going from ignorance, unconsciously knocking our heads, stumping our toes every now and then, and along the way learning, so that we can come out the other end of the underworld transformed. But, you know, I think all of us here, we've done a lot of work. So we've done that hero's journey already. Again, the magician's journey is taking that next step to make that all a whole lot more conscious.